This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast. Man, I got another fun interview for you. This young comic has been working for many years in the East Coast. He's out of Detroit, where he's had success on stage and on TV and all kinds of fun things. But hey, let's hear his story. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, Jeff Dwoskin. Jeff?
Oh, yeah, sit down.
Great to have you on the podcast. We were introduced to each other through Alex Sanfilippo, who's a terrific podcaster and friend. I've been able to learn a bit about you, but you've been doing comedy quite a while, right?
I've been doing comedy just about 20 years, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so you're past the open mic stage.
Yeah. I suppose so. You know, I haven't been doing it as much. The pandemic kind of caught me, like they all did, and I never fully recovered from that. But I've been podcasting and doing that, and so all good.
Yeah, the pandemic had a huge effect on the entertainment industry, including stand-up comedy, and you were able to pivot into some really interesting stuff that I want to talk about, but let's get to that later. Let's start off. Our listeners are really interested in stand-up comedy and in the lives of comics. At what age and how did you kind of start your career in comedy?
I started late. I wish I had started later. Probably late 20s, early 30s, before my child was born. So a little bit ago, but and so I started because I was the funny guy at work, and I didn't know how to start with comedy, but I had a web development company in the late 90s, and Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle was one of the websites we had done, and
I know Mark very well. He's another very successful club owner like I was, and the Comedy Castle has been around a long time. That's a great opportunity to start. So you did a few open mics to begin with? Yeah,
the Comedy Castle was my home club, so that's where I kind of grew up doing comedy. I took a comedy class there. I remember it on their website. They had advertised for that. So Gilda Hauser. I don't remember how many weeks it was. Let's say 6-8 weeks. You just went in, Gilda taught us, this joke writing structure, and then for stage practice. And then it ended with like a 7-minute, performance with the other people in the class. And we had, it was great. I mean, there were hundreds of people in that audience because everyone came to see us do comedy for the first time. So it was crazy. It was super fun, and it's addictive. So I never really stopped doing it. Like I did it a lot. Like it came first to everything. Any open mics or shows that I had to do came before family events, everything.
Well, Jeff, some comics just learn by the seat of their pants. Others take courses. I think that what you did is a great way to initiate yourself into the industry and in the art form. And it does kind of teach you some of the basics that give you a heads up, kind of a step up in the opportunities comedy brings. Do you remember your first joke that you wrote?
Yeah, I do remember my first joke very well. I will say just real quick is, I don't think you can learn how to be funny or be taught how to be funny. The comedy class to me, I think 95% of it was giving me an excuse and the confidence and the support system to get on stage. And then once I was on stage, then I then had the confidence just to keep going,
So it kind of helped you with the stage fright, but you felt pretty confident that you were a funny guy once you got up there.
Yeah, I felt comfortable. I felt comfortable on stage right away, and I really enjoyed it. There's a sense of piece. And, being kind of a little bit of an introvert, maybe at a party type thing where I can't function well when there's a lot of noise, you know what I mean? And like when you're in a party or a bar and you're like 1 foot away from someone, you can't hear anything they're saying. I can't function like that. I can't communicate. I can't scream. There's just too much nuance that goes into voice, or me being able to hear everything, to understand, and be quick with the return of even just normal conversation. And on stage, none of that exists.
You're in control, right? You're right. The whole point of being on stage is now you're the focus. You're in control, and whether it's loud or quiet is really, stand-up comic's kind of like a music composer or conductor, that you're going to take the audience where you want to take them, but you are in control. I think that there's a lot of control issues that comedy entertainers and actors and other people, even musicians that get on stage, I think it all kind of goes part and parcel with the whole genre of entertainment. But I think that makes a lot of sense, that you wanted and looked for an opportunity to share who you were, and by being on stage, you were able to control that. And a lot of comics have said once you get those first few laughs, it's like, a good drug. It's addictive. You want to get more. Yes.
I think there's two main phases to the origins of comedy that keep you moving. The first are the laughs, and that's the drug that you keep chasing. But then I think you also have to fail on stage so that you understand how that feels, so that you work extra hard to not make that happen.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jeff, for everybody listening. Anybody that's been successful in anything from show business to regular business to any sort of art form, you have to fail to succeed. I think it's part of the learning process. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, I was lucky enough to fail a couple times early.
Well, it's never a goal, but it is somewhat expected, especially in the open mic, first few years of getting on stage. I've had to bite that bitter taste of failure on stage, and it does make you work harder and try harder the next time. I think that's part of the learning process.
Yeah, absolutely. But you don't learn anything from a good show. You don't. It makes you feel really good. But everything you learn, I think you learn from those stumbles and failures in the beginning, that you then kind of, you're always learning, right? You're always going to do something. You're like, oh, all right, I'll adjust for that next time. But those are the things that, I think make you better, whether it be comedy or anything, really.
Well, it's the pressure that takes coal and turns it into a diamond. When I've used this analogy a few times, when you're working on a joke, there's different words, inflections in your voice, where it is in your set. You're constantly working on it to get it to the best possible place so that you can repeat it over and over and get those laughs. Speaking of that, what was that first joke or bit you wrote?
Okay. Don't judge me.
No, this is your first. I'm assuming it sucks or hacky.
All right, this is the first joke I ever wrote. It was, I was reading about this dentist that drugged his patient, stashed her away for like 30 days. And while that's tragic, it got me thinking, maybe if done properly, sex and dentistry actually had a place together. For example, last week I had a root canal, and I totally would have chosen a hand job over Novocaine. Why a hand job? Because apparently blowjobs aren't covered by my insurance.
Oh, wait, got to give you a little laughter. Well, for being new in the comedy and just getting started, that's not a bad premise. I mean, you're taking something everybody can relate to, which is going to the dentist and sex, and you're taking those two diametrically different things and shoving them together. And that's one of the studies of comedy, is you two normal things and you force them together for absurdity, and that causes laughter. I think that's not a bad start, Jeff.
Oh, thank you. It was based on a real article, so it was based on tragedy. I didn't completely make up the premise. There was an article about a dentist who had drugged a patient and had her in his basement for 30 days. What was extra awkward about the joke was that my dad was a dentist. So when he would come to see me and I would do that joke, then it was a little weird. I mean, it wasn't about him or anything, but
no,
it was about,
yeah, but that's still funny.
You know what I mean, and,
well, that's really interesting. So like you said, all of a sudden we're a true crime podcast, but you took an actual news story and turned it into something funny. But I think that all monologists, the goal is to engage with the audience, and that means talking about subjects that people can relate to. Jerry Seinfeld, Jay Leno, there's a lot of those guys that were, they made a craft out of that, but many, many, many more comics. And so you were on a good start. How long was it before you felt like you reached being a professional, that you were getting regular paid gigs?
When was I getting a regular pay?
It wasn't last week, right, Jeff?
No. It was maybe I'll say a year or two in, somebody started giving me a chance, and then it started picking up, and then it became, everything I was doing was mostly getting paid except for the open mics.
Did you tour?
That I picked up.
We should tell everybody you're out of Detroit, and that's where you got your start. We kind of alluded to that. But did you get a chance to do some road work and kind of stretch your feet in different audiences? So
my kind of foray into comedy was not what I would suggest for others that really want to do it. When I started out in Michigan, we were fortunate here to have a lot of clubs, like a lot. And so all within, 30 minutes of where I was. And now there's, two of those remain from, let's say 5+, closer to 7 that there were. And so, you could do comedy a lot, and that's not even counting the 100 open mics, just random
right
pop-ups.
And you took advantage of that and got on stage everywhere you could, right?
Oh yeah. I was nonstop. So I know I mentioned I started later in life. So I had a family, I had a job. So I had a certain salary income I needed to maintain to survive. And so I never was able to really travel or, become a road comic or, all that kind of stuff.
It was kind of a side gig for you, right, Jeff? You had a day job, you had a family, you had responsibilities. And by the way, it's important to find balance in life. But for yourself, getting on stage was that personal expression of artistic talent and opportunity. I think that's gives you a well-balanced life. Congrats on being able to do that. Not everybody can.
No, I appreciate that. And I know some people will hear this and go, well, then you're not a comic. But, it's like, it was one of the interesting things that I picked up on very early when I started working and I started to be able to feature or MC in Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle. During the early years, he would have you sign up and you would do a Thursday night, and then another weekend you would do a Friday night. So I could work multiple weekends in a given month or multiple months and work with multiple headliners because he didn't work you an entire weekend. Later, he realized it was much more efficient to just hire someone to work an entire weekend. So you would work with one headliner. But early on in my career, I was able to work a lot of weekends with a lot of different headliners in a very short period of time. And one of the things that I picked up on early, which may have been one of the distractions, was most of them were on their second, third, or fourth marriage.
Well, just like a lot of the other arts, comedy is tough on a relationship, especially if you go pro and you're touring. And because you got a little bit later start in life, you had a better balance. Well, you mentioned that you got a chance to work with a lot of different people. Who do you look up to in the industry? Was there anybody that took you under their wing and kind of helped you along? Any mentors?
I had one person that I look back on as a big thank you, and that's Mary Ellen Hooper. We worked together at Mary Ellen Hooper, very funny comedian, and she out of Florida. We were working together in Ann Arbor, and she pulled me aside and she's like, Jeff, I think you're really funny, but you're all over the place. You're doing 1 minute, you're doing an observation joke, and the next minute you're doing this. And he goes, you're just a family guy. You're a frustrated family. You're the dad. Get rid of everything else and just focus on that. That's your persona. And I was like, all right. And so I thought about it. Some of the other jokes I rewrote, because sometimes it's not about getting rid of material. It's about reframing it to a different point of view, right? So I did that. Anything that wasn't in that category, I just stopped doing, and I spent some time and I rebuilt it up to where that was it. If any jokes or anything I was doing in one way or another tied into me being a father, my kids, my wife, being married.
Yeah, came from that perspective. I think she gave you great advice. And once you find your niche in comedy and you can build on it, it really helps you hone your set, right?
Yeah, exactly. Having kind of a specific focus like that absolutely helps you kind of determine a lot of things and a lot of ways to approach material. And so, and like I said, it helped me kind of rethink, all right, well, I really like this joke. Oh, well, what if I come at it from this angle, and then I can still use this piece? Or, I had a whole joke, a 3-minute joke. I just took out one line that was in there about my mother-in-law, and then that became something I used somewhere else. But I think it helps the audience follow and connect and understand with you better because they understand who you are, whether they agree with one of your observations or not in a set. I think they can also connect with an entire persona, and that can help override and make you more likable as well.
Well, I think that was great advice, and you were smart to follow it, and then it helped you as a comedy writer and develop your set because now you had a core vision of where you wanted to bring your comedy from, and that was as a father and as a dad, and everybody can relate to that because everybody's a father, dad, or kid of a father, dad, right? So that was really good. Now, are there things that you know now, or let's say in the last 5 years of comedy, that you wished you knew when you got started?
I wish I knew when I started what a horrible, when I say horrible business it is, I mean, I think comedians aren't treated well. You know what I mean? Like, keep in mind, like, I came from a corporate background, right? So I came from that structure, that mindset. So the idea that I would have a friend that was booked at a weekend and then that weekend decided to hire someone else and just screw that person over and not pay them because they didn't have a contract because, we don't do contracts, right?
Right. No. It's a tough industry. I mean, it's not just comedy. It's happened to musicians and other people. But you're absolutely correct. Show business can be cutthroat. And if you don't have a thick skin and a real sense of consistency and persistency to develop your entertainment value, you're going to, fall apart under the pressure.
Well, I don't even mean it from that point of view. I don't disagree with anything you just said. I mean showing up to a gig and at a bar, and we've all done it, right? And there's no one there. It's a random bar. It's not you're not in the position to have been the name to draw people in, right? We're just there to fill the time, right? And no one shows up, and they go, "Do your full time in front of no one." Yes, in front of no one. Okay. You know what I mean? It's like things like that where I think like there's a lack of respect and thinking that we're just pawns that they can just use.
Yeah.
It just never, sometimes it didn't feel like we were treated like humans. Now keep in mind, I'm not talking about the main clubs that I worked. I'm talking about some of those
the road stuff, the one-nighters, those are tough. I was really lucky when I started my club, Laughs Unlimited. I was taught by comics, Bob Saget, Dave Coulier, George Wallace, people like that, Gary Shandling. And one of the things they instilled in me is that if I respected the entertainment, they would respect me in the club. And so I always had a real respect for the artist, whether they were great or sucked. The point is they were doing something that most people weren't willing to do, which is get up on stage in front of a bunch of strangers and try to make them laugh. And you have to respect, even if somebody bombs, that they had the balls to get up there and do it. But I think you bring up a good point, is that sometimes comics are like just this week's meat, right? They're not given the respect for the work and the effort and the artistic aspects that they're bringing to this art form. Now, I use terms like art form and artistic because I'm a real fan and understand the work it takes to be a good stand-up comic. But a lot of club owners, bartenders, staff, people in general don't understand the work it takes. They think, because, and be honest, there is a lot of people that just go up and drop a lot of F-bombs and think they're funny comics, right? So, you know, the audience, some of these people have built their attitude towards comics based on the worst case scenario. Does that make sense?
Right. But then when I don't disagree with that at all, but then you got to take a step back and then, you know, but that is a club shouldn't just try and fill the stage with people who actually shouldn't be on that stage.
Oh, no,
But I know what you're talking about. I was working at a club once. I was closing. Closing to me is the phrase that I use. It means I went last, but I didn't feel I was the headline. I didn't feel I was the headline. You know what I mean? Like I respectfully, you know, so the people that they put up before me, I was so mad. Like I was so mad. It was the only time in my entire career of anything, but comedy specific, that I had to talk myself out of not walking out because it was so bad. And I'm talking not one comic. I'm talking a 45-minute, like I was walking into like a bloodbath of not bad audience. The audience was fine, of such horrible comedians that I was embarrassed that the people in the audience thought this was comedy and I was about to step up. And I was, you know, it wasn't like a main club or anything like that. It was, you know, but it was just, I'm like, oh, you can really hate yourself when like, you know, when you're, you know, when the people that you know in the audience is not being I know so many good comics, you know what I mean? It's just like, it can be frustrating.
Oh, no.
I don't know.
And that was exactly my point, is that people see a couple bad comics, you know, the funny guy or the class clown that goes up and does a bunch of dick jokes, and they go, oh, that's stand-up comedy. Then, you know, I opened a whole club, just like Mark Ridley, that, hey, we're doing stand-up comedy, and people are going, well, if I want to hear a bunch of F-bombs and dick jokes, I'll go in there. But if I want true funny comedy, I have to find it on TV or something, which is so not true. The best comedy is live comedy, when a comic is a professional and has really well-written, honed material, and he engages with the audience. It's not just one or two people laughing or the comic sharing funny material. It's the whole group coming together. That's that energy, that drug you were talking about that we feel on stage that makes you want to keep coming back time after time, including the audience. But like you said, if you're out at Bob's bar and he's putting up his cousin Vinny, who makes him laugh, you know, over drinks or something, there's not that same respect that should be due, not only for the comic, but I, as a producer, you got to respect the audience. Whether they paid or not, they're there to be entertained. You have an obligation to entertain them, not just throw any shit up on the wall and see if it sticks.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree with you. We're right on the same page with this. In the example I was talking about, when the guy got off stage, he walked half the audience. And after the show, in his mind, his self-awareness was they didn't want to see me. Oh, Jeff got on stage and they left.
Well, that's that protective ego, I guess. That's just sad. Well, you've had a lot of success. Could you explain to the audience? I know that you won the Dick Purtan Comedy Showcase Award. Dick was a respected radio star in Detroit, and they have this, tell everybody what the Dick Purtan Comedy Showcase Award is.
Oh, wow. That was a really fun night. Dick Purtan was in Detroit, like the main person. Like if you were a comedian, you came into town, you went on the Dick Purtan show, and he was revered by any comedian that would come into Michigan at all. He was the place to go. And his wife was had health issues, and there was a fundraiser, and I think Tim Allen performed in this one, and Kathleen Madigan, and Greg Warren, and Michael Costa, and
those
from the Daily Show now.
Great people.
And so it was real fun. So they picked 4 of us to do like 3 minutes, or maybe 3 of us to do 4 minutes up front. And then they picked one of us as a winner. And then we got to go to Cancun. And so I ended up winning. And it was just like, it was really cool. I was fortunate early. I won a bunch of like little contests here and there, but it's funny that contest, I would say, was fine. It was a fine contest. It was,
Hey, but you got a free trip to Cancun, everybody.
Yeah.
That is cool, though, to get that kind of respect and acknowledgement from somebody that's well respected in the radio industry. And in LA, San Francisco, Alex Bennett in San Francisco, there was a couple people in New York. A lot of the states or big cities would have a radio DJ that really accepted and brought comedy, stand-up comedy into the shows. I know when I got started, there's a station here in Sacramento called KZAP, and this is back in the 80s, but I could walk in almost any time with comics like Bruce Baum and Jay Leno and Ray Romano, and we would literally hang out for like an hour and riff between songs with the DJs. And it sounds like Dick was real supportive of comedy, and that's a great honor to be a part of that.
Yeah, it was amazing. It really was. It was one of the highlights. I loved every second of that night. It was so cool. We got to hang out with Tim Allen backstage, and I got to meet his mom after. She said I was his favorite. I was her favorite. No.
That's awesome, Jeff.
She thought it was great, and so that was cool. And then, yeah, totally. Thank you for bringing that up.
No, it's great, and I'm glad that you had that experience, because getting acknowledgement for your comedy, whether it's from an audience or in a situation where you win a contest or get an award, does validate what you're doing. And I think that, like in any career, whether it's corporate or entertainment, getting some validation is so important to our egos, because we're all basically insecure, right? Now, how did you end up doing Live from Detroit? You had your own show there for a while, Live from Detroit, right?
I have a podcast. It's called Classic Conversations. At one point, it was called Live from Detroit, the Jeff Dwoskin Show. But it eventually evolved into Classic Conversations, same podcast. If you listen to earlier episodes, it's the Jeff Dwoskin Show, then Live from Detroit. It happened during the pandemic. Like a lot of podcasts popped up. I've been doing it now for over 2 years, and I love it. I talk to comedians. I talk to TV and film stars. I reached out to a lot of the comedians that I had worked with over the years. Like, for example, we mentioned Mary Ellen Hooper earlier, and so I had her on, and I was able to tell her the story that I told you. I hadn't seen her or talked to her in 10 years, but I told her the impact that she had on me and my comedy. And so that it was a nice conversation and an opportunity to catch up. But, I've been able to talk to some classic comics too, like Robert Klein, Wendy Liebman, Rita Rudner.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, one of the reasons I started my podcast, the audience has heard the story, but I wrote a book about my years on the fringe of show business, over 40 years. And my wife said, no one's going to read your stupid book, do a podcast. But what's been amazing is through the podcast, is much like you're doing, I got a chance to reconnect with old friends in the industry, plus a lot of new people like yourself, Jeff. And it's really great to share these stories with the audience, because there's people out there that either like stand-up comedy, they're interested or already in the industry, and they can learn things and hear things that I think are of value. So we appreciate being on. If people wanted to hear your podcast one last time, tell them where they can find it and the URL or the link or the name that they should Google.
Yeah, absolutely. The podcast is Classic Conversations. You can go to jeffisfunny.com or classic-conversations.com. That'll get you, both will get you to the same place. And it's on Apple, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can find Classic Conversation. So,
well, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you go check out his podcast. It sounds like he's had a chance to interview some amazing entertainers, and you can build your stand-up comedy repertoire by checking in on Jeff's podcast. But you mentioned early on that because you're a family man and you had responsibilities at home in Detroit, that you've had a background in web design and other businesses. Don't you also have a new company called Stampede?
Yeah, Stampede Social. It's an Instagram engagement campaign tool booster, I guess, if I could throw every word at it.
Yeah, let's cover everything.
Yeah, it's meant for high-end campaigns for agencies and influencers and large brands. It can deliver links without link in bio directly to DMs, and they're trackable. So you need to get people to content. You can do it from a post level or live or real event. And you can do contests real easy and, user generated content and all that kind of good stuff. The whole suite of tools. We took everything that is hard or painful about Instagram and made it super easy.
Oh, that's awesome. And for somebody that does a lot of social media work to market my podcast and just make sure people can find me, I think it's great to have that available out there. Would it be stampede.com? What's the actual URL?
The actual URL is stampede.social. Stampede.social.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you or your company are looking for some help and support and to make life easy while working on Instagram, check out stampede.social and talk to Jeff Dwoskin and his staff, and they'll help make that happen for you. Well, Jeff, you've had such a great career, a combination of three things, really. You're obviously, and most importantly, a father and a family man. And I think that that's unusual, actually, in this business, that you're able to balance these things. You've been a successful professional comic where, whether it's through your podcast or on stage, you've been recognized as an entertainer and been doing it for many years. And you're also a media expert and have your own company that supports small and medium-sized business when it comes to social media. Jeff, that seems like the trifecta. You're doing great.
Well, when you put it that way, yeah, I'm pretty cool.
Well, it's important that you feel the success and the joy that you not only have brought to yourself and your family, but look at the laughter and the joy you've brought audiences over the years. I thank you so much for being on the podcast. And is there any other projects coming up in 23, 24 that you'd like to share with the audience?
No, I just want to keep everyone focused. Go subscribe to the podcast. Listen to like 30 episodes if you can. You need to do that to get a real feel for it, right? You know what I'm talking about. And 30, 40, just put it on.
Yeah, one or two is not enough. You got to stick with it.
One or two is not enough. Like really deep dive. There's over 170 episodes. So, say goodbye to your family. No, that's it. Just check. I'd love it if you check out my podcast, Classic Conversations, and then deep dive this podcast as well. Make sure you listen to all the past episodes here as well. I don't want to take all of the.
You don't want to take all the listeners, keep them to yourself. No. Well, ladies and gentlemen, not only is he a successful social media magnate, he and a father, but a terrific comic, and we want to share that with you, just like all of my shows. We have a few minutes of Jeff's stand-up comedy coming up right now. Jeff, thanks so much for being on the podcast, and continued success.
Thank you so much. I had such a good time talking with you. Thank you.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is live on stage, Jeff Dwoskin.
What did I do? Took the kids to Disney World last year. Yeah, let me say, if you love your family and you're getting along great, do not go to Disney World. There's something about expensive fun that just pushes people over the edge. It's like 1 minute you're like, oh my God, there's Mickey Mouse. And the next second you're like, get in the goddamn teapot! And there's nothing worse than when your kid is flipping out in front of 50,000 other people. There's nothing worse in the world. Else's kid flipping out in front of 50,000 other people. There's nothing better in the world to watch at all. There's like that and then a sunset. It's amazing more people are pushed in front of the monorail. So then you gotta meet all the characters, we're meeting all the characters, and they're like, oh, Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse, and then you gotta buy the stuffed animals, which are reasonably priced at $400 each. Later that night, in the hotel room, my daughters are like, Daddy, play dolls with us. And I'm like, all right, I'll play dolls with you. As a parent, you want to kind of slip in a life lesson if you can. You're like, oh, look, honey, here comes Mickey Mouse. He owns an entertainment empire. He would make an excellent husband. Repeat after me, Mrs. Sophie Mouse. Like, oh, look, and here comes Mickey Mouse. She's the bitch keeping you from Mickey Mouse. And they're like, make him talk. And they're like, stay away from my man, you whore. Run, Sophie, run. She may have a gun.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Jeff live on stage. Just a little bit of comedy, and I appreciate him coming on the show and sharing his story as a stand-up comic. I hope you got something out of it and enjoyed the conversation. Hey, stay tuned. Next week, we'll have another great show. We really appreciate you, our listening audience. Be sure to share with family and friends. Rate us when you can, and we'll be back with you soon. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, Your Host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.